For more than 60 years, one single horrific night has cast this long, dark shadow over Finland. It's a case filled with the most bizarre clues, some really shocking twists, and a mystery that, to this day, has never been solved. So, let's set the scene. The year is 1960. We're in a beautiful, picturesque forest in southern Finland, the kind of place that's super popular with locals just looking to get outdoors and enjoy nature.
And at the heart of our story are two young couples, teenagers really, just on the verge of starting their adult lives, heading out for what they thought was going to be a perfect weekend getaway.
But what started as this idyllic trip under the midnight sun? Well, it would spiral into a brutal and just completely inexplicable nightmare. Okay, so picture this. It's the afternoon of June 4th, and these four teenagers get to Lake Bodom. Now, the sun in Finland around this time of year, it never fully sets. It creates this thing they call a white night. It just casts this beautiful kind of hazy glow over everything, the absolute perfect setting for a little birthday celebration. So the group was made up of two couples. You had Mela and Nils, and then their friends Anja and Seppo. They put up their one canvas tent, they have a few drinks, they go for a swim, and eventually all four of them pile into that tent to go to sleep with absolutely no idea of the horror that was waiting for them. Sometime in the really early hours of the morning, an unknown attacker just descended on them with this savage fury. Without even opening the tent, the killer started stabbing and beating the teenagers right through the fabric. It was just this chaotic, terrifying assault in the near-total darkness. When police were finally called to the scene, just before noon, what they found was a crumpled heap of canvas and a bloodbath. Anja, Seppo, and Mila were all dead. Miraculously, Nils Gustafsson was found nearby, his head beaten almost beyond recognition, but somehow he was still clinging to life. But as soon as the investigation kicked off, police were immediately stumped. I mean, the crime scene was just a mess of contradictions, and none of the evidence seemed to point to any clear motive or suspect. The list of things that were stolen was just baffling. Wallets and watches? Okay, that suggests a robbery. But why would you steal the keys to the motorcycles and then just leave the bikes behind? And even weirder, why take one victim's jacket and his shoes? It just didn't add up at all. And the killer's bizarre behavior just kept going. The military was actually called in to search this huge forest, and they eventually found Nils's shoes about 500 meters away, kind of partially hidden, and bloody tracks nearby showed the killer had actually put on the victim's shoes, walked away in them, and then just ditched them. It was such a perplexing, almost ritualistic thing to do. So when Nils finally recovered enough to talk, his memory was completely shattered. He couldn't remember the details of the attack, but he had this one haunting, fragmented image. A dark figure with these bright, glowing red eyes. As you can imagine, this terrifying description gave the police almost nothing real to work with. So with very little physical evidence and a super confusing crime scene, the case went cold for decades. But over the years, suspicion would fall on a few key people, and each one of them had their own compelling and conflicting story. And then came the most stunning twist of all. In 2004, a full 44 years after the murders, the police arrested the only survivor, Nils Gustafsson. Can you believe it? He's now a 62-year-old bus driver with a family, and suddenly he's being accused of being the monster from that night. The trial really came down to two completely different versions of reality. The prosecution, they claimed that Nils got into a fight with Seppo, maybe over his girlfriend Mila, and in this fit of jealous rage, murdered everyone and then faked his own injuries. But the defense argued, no way. He was a traumatized victim and his injuries were way too severe to be self-inflicted. In the end, the jury just didn't buy the prosecution's story. Nils Gustafsson was acquitted of all charges. The court even awarded him money for the mental anguish he went through because of the accusation. And just like that, the case was officially back to square one, completely unsolved. But there was another suspect who the locals have been pointing to from the very beginning, a guy named Carl Valdemar Julstrom. People called him the Kiosk Man. He and his wife ran a little snack stand that the teens had actually visited. And Julstrom was notorious for his violent temper and this deep, intense hatred he had for anyone camping near his property. I mean, this wasn't just dislike, he was known to actively attack campers' sites. So fast forward 9 years after the murders. Gillstrom is having a drink with his neighbor when he supposedly confesses. He just turns to his neighbor and says, "Don't you understand that I'm the murderer of Bodom?" Just a chilling, direct admission of guilt. What happened next is almost too strange to believe. The neighbor, totally horrified, just replied that if what he said was true, he should go drown himself. And the very next day, Carl Gillstrom's body was found in Lake Bodom. His death was never definitively ruled a suicide or an accident, just gone. So with Nils acquitted and the most likely suspect dead, the Lake Bodom murders became cemented in Finnish culture as the ultimate unsolved crime. It's that ghost story told around campfires, a true-life horror story that just refuses to give up any answers. I mean, when you look at the three main suspects, you can see exactly why this case is still open. You have Nils, who had a potential motive but was acquitted. There was another man, Hans Osman, who matched a sketch of a fleeing man and showed up at a hospital covered in dirt, but he had a rock-solid alibi. And then there's Carl Gillstrom, the kiosk man, who confessed, but his wife gave him an alibi, and he died before he could ever be properly interrogated. It's so frustrating. The crime really has transformed the place itself. The beautiful lake isn't just a spot for recreation anymore. It's become a site of grim pilgrimage for people fascinated by dark history, a landmark that's forever defined by the brutal, unsolved murders of 3 teenagers. And that really leaves us with the most haunting question of all. Was Carl Gillstrom's confession the truth? Was that a man finally unburdening his soul right before taking his own life? Or was it just the drunken boast of a violent man, a mystery that ultimately drowned with him in the very lake he terrorized? We may never know.